Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. I believe I was the first one in the world to point out that there's a lot going on in Europe that you need to focus on happening beneath the surface. Hello, Germany 4.0? Let's get some more details from Stacy Herbert.
Yes, Max. We're seeing the introduction of neo-feudalism into Europe, as we've said all along. Sell, sell, sell. Everything must go in great fire sale. Europe's most indebted countries and Britain have put prized assets up for grabs to bolster their credit worthiness. So what exactly is on offer, Max?
Tell us everything.
Well, we know in Greece, we've already listed that last episode. Ireland has the national airline, ports, power stations, energy suppliers, transport systems, sporting assets, and even the Irish national stud.
Well, thank you very much, but I'm not for sale.
Whatever that is. I assume it has something to do with horses.
It's all about horse semen.
Okay. And then Spain is selling 30% of its state lottery. Now, this is the biggest lottery in the world. It's called El Gordo. It's been around for 151 years. But Spain is not as badly indebted as other European countries, but bond yields have soared. So because of this, they have to sell El Gordo. The company recorded €3 billion net profit in 2009 on sales of 9.8 billion euros, meaning the sell-off will reduce Treasury income by about 1 billion euros a year.
Okay, so Spain is now being attacked by the financial terrorists, the people who sell short bonds to destabilize the country's finances in preparation of extracting wealth. And they use, of course, naked short sales, which are counterfeiting. They sell things that don't exist. It's a counterfeit operation. So here you have the same people. They've been emboldened and empowered because of their successful raid on Ireland, their successful raid on Greece. And they're using more of their power and influence and cash that they got from acts of financial terrorism in those two countries. Now they're going after Spain. And here he made a good point. The Spanish lottery system is generating huge profits. There's no need to sell it. But the Moody's and the S&P and the Fitch and the rating agencies, combined with the Wall Street banks and the hedge funds like John Paulson and the Wall Street banks and the corrupt government officials in Europe have colluded together, obviously, to impose draconian measures as a result of a racketeering charge, a racketeering campaign to destabilize and confiscate. This is, terrorism. But, as I've said to the people all along, the fact that they don't rise up and revolt, the joke's on you.
But this is the thing that we're seeing across Europe. People are giving up, these nations are giving up income-producing assets. They're toll booths, right? These are toll booths that give income to the government. First of all, by giving those over, they reduce their revenue, further destabilizing their own economies. But it's neo-feudalism. Some outsider, some lord somewhere else is basically collecting that revenue, and it's going outside of the country.
So in the case of Greece, they're going to sell the state lottery for something like 450 million. And it generates, I believe, 900 million in income. Now, think of it in these terms. If Greece's state lottery were to simply list themselves on NASDAQ, that amount of income, 900 million in income, would be worth 9 to 15 billion as a stock equity offering on NASDAQ. Take a company like Groupon, for example. They're losing $450 million a year. They're going to go public on NASDAQ for 20 billion.
Exactly. So why doesn't Greece just put up their national lottery on the NASDAQ?
Yeah, they're making 900 million. Simply list it on a tradable exchange. It'll be worth 30 to 40 billion.
Well, part of the reason, of course, is all these nations have IMF loans. Not Spain, but Greece and Portugal do. And they are required to only go to the IMF for any further loans. They're not allowed to raise money on their own unless the IMF and the ECB say, do it this way.
Required per some deals that were written and signed off by governments, like in Greece, Papandreou is a treasonous, what should we call him?
And the other thing about Spain, of course, is why their bonds are being attacked, why their sovereign debt is being attacked, is people will tell you, well, this is capitalism because basically the bondholders are assuming that even though the government has low debt, just like Ireland did before the crisis, they're assuming that the government will be forced to take on the private debts of the banks, i.e. the taxpayer will be forced to eat these bad debts of the Spanish banks and therefore crumble their own economy.
It's not capitalism.
Exactly.
It has nothing to do with capitalism. Capitalism infers competition. If you're not allowed to compete because the state is orchestrating takeovers from foreign banks of your assets, that's called an occupation. That's like saying, oh, the people in Gaza, the problem is capitalism. No, the problem is they're being occupied.
Well, here's the evidence, of course. And this has been big news. Everybody's talked about it. Greek sell-off threat to sovereignty. Greece staved off the immediate threat of default at the weekend, but now faces severe restrictions on its sovereignty and must push through a wave of privatizations akin to the vast sell-off of East German firms in the 1990s after the fall of communism. This is from Jean-Claude Juncker, chairman of the Eurogroup of finance ministers.
This is my thesis. This is what I've been saying. This is the underlying reality of all the European crises, is Germany is rising from the rubble of World War II, and we're talking about the reappearance of the Imperial Germany, or the Fourth Reich. Here you have a reunified Germany who is now talking about Greece as South Germany. They say,
well, that's essentially what it's becoming.
Yeah, they're comparing South Germany or Greece with East Germany. They're simply saying, well, just like in East Germany, we took all the assets and we merged into one superpower, imperial, conquistador, European threat, as we have been in the past. And the thing about the euro was supposed to eliminate the German imperial threat. But they figured out a way around it. As a matter of fact, they orchestrated the whole thing as a way to reunify Germany. And now they're talking about Greece as being South Germany.
So this guy, let's call him Juncker, because he's a junk bond salesman, basically. He's pushing junk on everybody. He's taking the junk off the private bankers' asset holdings and transferring it to the national governments and the ECB in the EU. But he's likening what's going to happen to Greece to the True Hand Agency sell-off of 14,000 East German assets between 1990 and 1994. But of course, that was done in order to merge East Germany into West Germany. And there was 2.5 million jobs were lost, but there was also a transfer of technology from the likes of BMW to the East, which had Trabant as the peak of their their income-producing car manufacturing assets. So there was a transfer. There was something the East Germans got back. They got nice infrastructure built by the West German firms. So where is Greece being merged into, and what are they getting back?
Yeah, they're being merged into Germany, and they get back the privilege of not being killed by German army people with guns. That's what they get in return.
Well, it was the French banking system and Sarkozy, and they all concocted this Fakakta plan, which I guess was being rejected by S&P. It's counting as default. But here's a country that had this revolution where heads were chopped off because of toll booths introduced everywhere in society. So the French banking group, one of their plans was that the rollover of debt of the French sovereign bond holdings of Greek debt would force them to reinvest 70% of that into Greek bonds, yielding at least 5.5%. But the Greeks were forced to reinvest the money they got in this loan back into European AAA debt, paying like 2%. So it was a wealth transfer. It was a constant annual wealth transfer.
That's exactly right. Just adding more debt. That's always been the solution since the end of Bretton Woods in 1971. Just add more debt. Add more debt.
As always, got to go back to America because somehow they think that being part of the empire leaves them immune.
Oh, you mean Western Germany?
West Germany.
West Germany. That little land space between Canada and Mexico. West Germany.
I think the people have an instinct that the IMF is going to come there and steal their assets, so they're getting rid of the assets before the IMF and the bankers can take it. Authorities offer $500 for tips in heist of dozens of hydrants. So this is from Riverside County in California, which is having massive heat waves, fire alerts everywhere. Water agency officials say that somebody stole more than 60 fire hydrants, manhole covers, and other pieces of utility equipment throughout Riverside County.
Yeah, this is really where you see an amazing force multiplier, to use a Dick Cheney term, where you've got the ecological restraints are causing global warming to kick in, which would require the use and need of a fire hydrant to put out the fires that are being created by man-made global warming, which is being exacerbated by the theft of the fire hydrants brought on by excessive credit creation by the central banks who are trying to bail out all these banks around the world. And those two are coming together, forcing the price of what the fire hydrants are made out of, metal, higher, incentivizing people to steal them at the same time that global warming is increasing the rate of fires, which of course will increase the rate of money creation. It will increase the price of fire hydrants, and you get into a vicious cycle. And pretty soon there won't be any fire hydrants left at all.
But, Max, speaking of vicious cycles and money creation, here's our final headline. Case for a balanced budget amendment, charts of the day, transfer payments, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, etc. versus total government receipts. So this is from Ms. Shedlock, but we're going to concentrate just on these transfer payments versus total government receipts. Chart 1. Here is the personal current transfer receipts. These are things like Medicaid, Medicare, and food stamps. And you see that's almost $2.4 trillion in the U.S. Chart 2, federal government receipts. So this is their income they collect. That's just over $2.4 trillion. And then chart 3 is the personal transfers as a percentage of government receipts. And you can see, Max, that as a percentage, it was under 50% in the 60s and 70s, the glory days of America. And then as a percentage, it went over that, and now it's close to 100% of all income to the government is paid out in food stamps and Medicare and Medicaid.
Well, you see, the country has become basically a baboon petting zoo. You see, the people come to visit to pet the baboons in America, and the money that they deposit at the baboon petting zoo is used to feed the baboons. So that's the business model left in America. That's all they got left. There's one big baboon petting zoo.
Yeah, but you wonder, like, who's financing the rest of this? Either Americans are living totally off the kindness.
The Greeks are financing the rest of it through a transfer mechanism of imposing austerity measures in Greece, Portugal, and Spain so that the banks can keep the baboon petting zoo in America open.
And of course, there's China and there's Japan who are financing to the tune of $2 trillion a year, all these debts of America. So is it going to feed the American population in the baboon petting zoo or the military operations around the world? It looks like a worse situation than in Greece.
All right, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away, much more coming your way, so stay right there.
The close-up team has been to the Republic of North Ossetia, where half of the area is occupied by a nature preserve. This time, RT goes to the region where men flock from all over the world to add a few centimeters to their self-confidence, where young families are not hesitant about having a senior citizen in their family, and where one man's utopia turns into a real village of the shining sun. Welcome to the Kurgan region. Russia Close-Up on RT.
Download the official RT application to your iPhone or iPod Touch from the iTunes App Store. Watch RT live on the go. Video on demand. RT's live broadcasts. And RSS feeds now in the palm of your hand. Question more on RT.com.
Welcome to the future.
bringing you the latest in science and technology from around Russia.
We've got the future covered.
Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Time now to go to New York and speak with Dr. Michael Hudson. Dr. Hudson, welcome back to the Keiser Report.
Thank you very much.
All right, Dr. Michael Hudson, let's get into Greece. Your thoughts on Greece. What's happening?
Well, it's as if finance has become the new mode of warfare there. The Financial Times reported that when Parliament passed the agreement to surrender to Europe, it was done to the smell of tear gas and the sign of sirens. And the Wall Street Journal had a very interesting article saying, well, now it's time for them to sell off the Parthenon, sell off the Greek islands. This is what in the past you needed an army to achieve. What today is being done financially. So finance and bankers are the new army. And instead of an army coming in to seize the land, which involves people dying, you simply have the IMF representatives and you buy out the Socialist Party and tell them, look, just surrender. Give us your land. Give us your property. This is phase 2 of the financialization program, and I can't believe that this is going to actually succeed if a country is going to impose itself in poverty, reduce its wages by 30%, and forfeit the entire public sector to foreign creditors. People should have a vote, otherwise it's not legal. There's no referendum in Greece over whether people are going to actually democratically acquiesce in a surrender. And this means that when there is an election, if there ever is, the Greeks can legally say, look, this was imposed upon us. We didn't vote. It's not democratic. It's not binding. And they can take back whatever is being given, because certainly there will be another default. Certainly the way to make sure there's a default is to follow the EU plan and the IMF plan and impoverish the economy, because impoverished economy makes it less able to pay, not more able. This is the one thing that the whole world has learned from the IMF austerity programs in the 1960s, the 1970s, and the 1980s.
Okay, so when you hear people debating this, they bring up Iceland. They also bring up Argentina. They say you can't make the comparison with Iceland or Argentina. In Iceland's case, they say, well, you know, it was the krona. It wasn't part of the euro. Greece is bound by the euro. So how do you come back and talk about those concerns or those folks who say you can't really compare the two?
Well, when Greece joined the euro, what it thought it was doing was joining a united Europe. And the idea of the united Europe, the European Union, was Europe was never going to go to war internally with each other again. Somehow, the idea of European unity became hijacked to surrender to a financial oligarchy and turn over all the property to bankers at the wealthiest 1% of the pyramid and roll back the last 1,000 years to neo-feudalism. Greece didn't realize it was signing on to neo-feudalism, and that's what the European Central Bank is all about. It's not a central bank. It doesn't do what a central bank does. It doesn't finance government budget deficits, which is what the Bank of England, the New York Federal Reserve, or U.S. Federal Reserve, and other banks do. It simply stands by and forces government deficits to result in more and more debt to commercial banks, so that instead of government deficits expanding the economy with new investment and employment and full market demand, a government deficit shrinks the economy by leading to foreclosure and forfeiture of the public domain, forfeiture of houses, and mass impoverishment. That is not what Greece thought it was signing on to. So what it should do is saying, this is not the Europe we thought we were getting. We're withdrawing. We suggest that Spain, Portugal, and Ireland withdraw, just as Ireland voted against the Lisbon Constitution. And they should say, this is nonsense. This is war, and we're pulling out, and we're putting our economy up for grabs for those countries, probably in the BRIC bloc, that will accept us into their currency area, because we're not going to stand for this.
Okay, so you mentioned Germany there. Germany is portraying themselves as the victim, that Greece are feckless characters that don't pay their bills, they're underwriting their retirements, and everyone should feel sorry for Germany. And yet, of course, Germany has benefited wildly because during all of this, it has kept the euro relatively cheap, and Germany is a huge export powerhouse. So talk a little bit about this. Is Germany the victim, or is Germany really the predator?
Well, both, because the question you're really asking is, what is Germany? Is Germany the banks, or is Germany the industry and the population? German banks have recklessly lent out money, as have French banks, to Greece, and are holding Greek bonds at who knows what value. We don't know how the German banks are valuing the Greek bonds on their balance sheet. Right now, a German or French or other European bank can buy a Greek government bond, say 50%, pledge this to the European Central Bank and get full euros at full value on the dollar and get free money by speculating. We don't know whether the German banks or the French banks are carrying this Greek debt at market value or at nominal face value. So Germany itself is being sacrificed to the banks, and I don't think you can say that the interest of the banks, of the 1%, is the interest of Germany, unless you're redefining Germany and redefining Europe as a kind of neo-feudal oligarchic society run by the bank. So that's why Angela Merkel herself is losing electoral support in Germany. The whole political spectrum in Europe is being thrown into disarray by the fact that what do the words left and right mean when you have the whole issue basically one of finance. Finance cuts across the political spectrum from left to right. It cuts across the spectrum of what is Germany, what is France, what is Europe, and it really has put the class war back in business in a very different way than was foreseen in times past. It's a class war of banks against all the rest of society trying to grab all of the property. And the political spectrum hasn't been able to deal with this, except that the socialist parties and social democratic parties and Socialist International, of which President Papandreou is the head in Greece, are on the far right of the political spectrum now. And the old right-wing parties, the conservatives, are moving to the left of the socialists. Everything is turned upside down by financializing economies in this way.
So financial engineering has become the new means of production. Setting up the ancient class wars have reemerged, but the classes that are getting disenfranchised are not even aware of the fact that they're being occupied by these weapons of mass financial destruction, these financially engineered products. It's a stealth coup. The people in Greece seem completely, they don't know that they're being attacked in this way.
Well, if you relate financial engineering to the means of production, it doesn't create new means of production. It strips assets. And this is what's been happening in America since the 1970s with the junk bond takeovers, the financial takeovers. Almost all of these takeovers have ended up impoverishing the companies. You have a financial takeover followed by a wipeout of the pension funds, of the employee stock ownership plans. You have a wipeout of what these companies have owed for pensions, and you have really a looting by the financial sector. This is not a production function. This is a looting function, and that's what the financial sector has turned into today. Looting, not financing the means of production.
Right. And you could say that these banks are, however, producing risk. That's what the end product of their production is, and they put it into the public domain. But I wanted to ask you just to walk through kind of the global financial market here for a second. Let's say that the European banks, they're buying Greek debt. They stand to lose a lot of money if Greece or when Greece defaults. However, there's another wild card here in that apparently the American banks have taken out insurance for the European banks and their bond holdings in the form of credit default swaps. Who actually stands to lose the most here? The European banks who own the bonds or the American banks who insured the bonds?
There are a lot of financial analysts that are asking that, and what they have noticed is that just as the EU and the European Central Bank was to take a more lenient position to Ireland, you had U.S. Treasury Secretary Geithner saying, wait a minute, take a hard line for Ireland. You have to crush it because the U.S. banks, financial casinos, have insured Irish debt. Same thing with Greece. It's the U.S. Treasury that comes in and says, wait a minute, our financial system has turned into AIG. We've insured the Greek debt, and we can't afford to take a loss, so your Europeans have to take a loss. You have to impoverish your labor so that our Wall Street casino capitalist firms like Goldman Sachs can make a killing, and they can't pay their people $100 million a year in salary if you don't impoverish your labor. We're making money off you, and that's the financial system. That's what we call stability. So you may think it's our risk, but it's not our risk if we're telling you what to do. It's what you refer to risk isn't a risk if you let the U.S. Treasury act as the battering ram for the Wall Street firms that insure the risk and say, you think there's risk? We're going to make sure that all the risk is on the debtor, and if the debtor can't pay, the creditors don't lose, the insurance companies don't lose, because we're going to take it out of Greek hide. Give us the Parthenon. Give us your islands. Give us your ports and your water supply and your sewer system for us to put toll booths on. That's the kind of risk that the U.S. is talking about. What Greece is risking is a lapse back into something worse than it suffered under the Ottoman Empire in the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries.
Is the IMF solvent?
It depends what you say solvent is. It was almost out of business 2 years ago when it had only Turkey as the final client. What has saved the IMF has been the Wall Street crisis. That's put it back into business, essentially as the hangman of economies. The IMF has been called in like a firm would call in a group of mafia assassins to kill the labor union organizers in a company town. And that really is the IMF's role. It's the assassin of economy. So is it solvent? Well, it's backed by the military. It's backed by the U.S. government in the IMF. The very fact that they've appointed such a notorious anti-labor advocate as Christine Lagarde should just lead all the countries to say, look, you're irreformable. We've got to start over again. We're not going to stand for it.
All right, Dr. Michael Hudson, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks again for being on the Keiser Report.
Thanks, Phil. It's a very pleasure to be here, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Dr. Michael Hudson. If you want to send me an email, please do so at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.